Welcome to the At Last Podcast, Episode 6, with Heidi Forbes Öste. Öste is a behavioral scientist and best-selling author whose new book, Digital Self-Mastery, is in stores now. In her writings, Heidi examines the nature of humanity's complex and interesting relationship with technology, one of the central themes being social optimization, a term that Heidi herself devised, meaning maintaining mutually beneficial and effective relationships. A key tenet of this philosophy is achieving what's known as optimal presence. I would elaborate further on this concept, except I think that Öste herself explains it best, using only one Swedish word, lagom, a word meaning just enough. As Öste points out, in a world of abundance and ubiquitous technology, we're constantly seeking balance. Part of this balance is learning to live with these ever-advancing technologies, using them as tools to enhance our daily lives. To quote Heidi, social technologies have added a layer of complexity and opportunity to what was once limited to in-person relationships. Right now in my hand, I'm holding a little machine that has the power to bridge continents, to bring us closer together, to have conversations. Social technologies such as mobile phones, podcasts, and virtual reality are shaping the way we interact with one another. As Charlie Chaplin famously said about television and the radio, these things have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Join me now on a journey to achieve digital and social self-mastery. Thanks for agreeing to do this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I appreciate it. Now, I think in today's world, we kind of think of technology, a lot of people that I've talked to think of technology as a hindrance or something which perhaps is stunting the growth of the future generation. But I think we also forget how drastically it improves our lives on a daily basis. And, my own life has been saved by technology, the ability to communicate rapidly. There's countless examples of things that technology allows us to do that we couldn't do before. Now, you recently embarked on a doctoral journey over the last several years in human and organizational systems, and you've explored wearable technologies as a potential intervention for hindrances to presence, as you call it. Now, there sort of seems to be two sides to this scale, and the first one is barriers to presence, and the second is actions or tools that we can use to enhance our presence. Now, I really am fascinated by the idea of barriers to presence. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, in the instance of this particular study, it was more looking at interventions that will be applied to people that have particular conditions that are hindering their presence. So there's a term in human resources mostly used that's called presenteeism, which is basically you show up physically, but you're checked out. And there's a lot of things that cause that, everything from chronic pain to lack of sleep to poor posture to depression. So, there's all these different things, sitting for too long. There's all kinds of different things. So I was looking at different interventions that will help counter those and actually counter the effects that are happening in your brain because of those. So, for example, when you're not getting enough sleep, your brain is not functioning fully because you're never getting your REM sleep. So if you're looking at things that can actually fix that, obviously, you're going to be your brain is going to be functioning better, your body's going to be functioning better, and it has sort of a whole bunch of different additional effects. So it was fun sort of testing out all these different wearable technologies, which were very new in that time and space, particularly around the wellness area. So it wasn't as broad as any technology. In this instance, it was looking at wellness wearables, and it was a range of different devices.
Okay. Now, yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that because I had read that something that you wrote in which you said stress triggers, sleep patterns, and idleness are all known physiological challenges that can impact our psychological behavior. And you said that wearables, which for people who may not know what wearables are, things like Google Glass, Apple Watch, anything that can sort of that can be worn on our physical being to, and you say to improve sort of our, or enables us to modify negative patterns of behavior. And that's extremely interesting. What is the most prime example that you found of that so far?
Well, I would say that there's two sides to that. And one is all of these fitness devices, they're getting people moving, and it's not necessarily because they're wearing the device. Part of it is sort of the psychosomatic of like, I've got this device that's tracking me. I better start moving.
Right.
And in the corporate environment, a lot of it was also because they were getting incentives to reach certain markers.
Okay.
So the activity was happening, and then as a result, the brain connectivity and the other pieces were happening because of those triggers. Like I said, there was a very wide range of devices that I used. One of them, for example, was a wearable vibrator. Of course, that's the one that got the most attention because I was looking at stimulating oxytocin in women who had hormone-related depression.
Wow, okay.
And so, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's about just sort of physical movement. It can also be about triggering your neurotransmitters from a secondary effect.
Wow.
And so I think that was that was a very interesting thing for me. But the other piece was really more that a lot of the devices, at least at that stage, and I think still to this day, are you never really get their full effect and their full value because they don't sort of fit seamlessly into your life, and they don't fit seamlessly into your way of being. And so it's really the ultimate challenge is identifying the right tools that will really enhance your life in a way that the benefits outweigh the change that's occurring. They're not actually, the use of the device is not getting in the way of the outcome.
Oh, I see. So something that sort of can be incorporated seamlessly into your daily routine.
Absolutely. So for me, and each person is so unique, so everybody has a different response. But for me, I use an Apple Watch. And the Apple Watch for me is the best seamless solution because it integrates with all of my other technology. I don't even think about the fact that I'm wearing a tracking device, and yet, and I use it for telling time, and occasionally I'll get a text from my kids that I can, voice to text, respond to them, but or when I'm driving, it'll remind me to turn left or turn right. But because it's passively tracking these things, I had an instance where, because of the Lyme disease that we talked about earlier, I got the babesia, which is a co-infection, got into my heart, and I was having some issues with my heart where my heart was just racing, and I thought I was having a heart attack. And because I'd been wearing the Apple Watch, I was able to actually pull up the data from what was going on with my heart, send a screenshot to my doctor, and he was able to send me medication.
Wow.
So, I mean, and that's the thing is, I wouldn't have been tracking my heart rate otherwise.
Who does, yeah.
Because it's not something that I ever thought of before.
That's fascinating.
So in that instance, it was very seamless for me. But that's not going to be for everyone. I mean, if you're,
of course,
if you're using some other devices or computer systems, an Apple Watch is just going to be a hindrance,
right?
Because it doesn't communicate with the other things,
right?
So, but in that particular instance, for me, that's where you really see that seamless effect, where the externalities just bubble up in all different areas, and you don't even realize they're happening.
Wow, that's so interesting. I think that's a very great example. I think for me personally, it would be there's an app called the Sleep Cycle Alarm Clock, and I'm sure you're familiar. But it essentially uses the gyrocopter inside your phone or the motion tracker inside your phone, which also the thing that's usually responsible for allowing the screen to flip and allocate itself to the proper position. But you activate it, and then you put it in the bed, and then it's able to, based on your movements at night, it's able to determine how much sleep you got, if you entered your REM cycle, because if you're moving around, usually it's hard to enter the REM cycle, because when the true definition of REM cycle is your brain has paralyzed your body and there's not movement, so you're able to literally track how much sleep you're getting every single night, and it keeps track of all the data, and so it can be this really helpful tool for achieving a state of restfulness, and you can program different alarms into it that aren't just just super blaringly horrible, but it is said was something that creeps over an hour, which is apparently how we're designed to wake up. in a more natural way. So I think that's really interesting. And I noticed you said earlier apps that involve a reward system. And this is where I kind of wanted to ask you about Interactions Muse. And for people who may not know, Interactions Muse is an EEG monitoring headband accompanied with a game that teaches the user to improve their focus.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is your experience with this device?
This one was actually quite fun. We used this in our study. And I got a bunch of the units prior to the study and was playing around with them at home. I've got 2 teenagers, and I was like, you guys want to try these and see how it goes? And it was fascinating because I had some friends over, and they all got totally into it. And they were being, competitive over who got more mindfulness scores, who was being more mindful. And at first, they, they were sort of like having to isolate themselves in the corner in order to get a better score. And then slowly over the course of a day, like doing it a couple more times, they were getting to the point where they could sit amongst all of the chaos in the room and their friends making noise, and they were able to get their brains totally relaxed and calm where their scores were getting better.
Wow.
And what I found was actually fascinating is not just in that short time of learning, but observing their behaviors over the following days, where they just seemed more sort of at peace and not as reactive. And it was really interesting to see that it's not just that one-time use. It's more, it just makes them conscious of the fact that, if I just breathe and just tune everything out for the moment and just focus on what I need to focus on, I'm able to, do what I need to do.
Wow.
And so that was in the unofficial study. In the actual study, there was some really interesting results in we had a bunch, I think that was one of the devices we had the most of, but some of them I gave to partners so that we could get more data. And so, you had 2 people sharing one device. And one of the groups was a couple, and they got really competitive about it. And to the point where one person stopped and said, this is not what mindfulness is all about. She got really upset about it. She was sort of, a little bit aggro, like
right.
this is not right. Mindfulness should not be a competition. Whereas he was like, well, this is great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it really, again, it's about matching the right device to the right person.
Right, of course.
And I think, Interactions Muse is, of the EEG headbands, at least in the last couple of years, mm-hmm. I haven't had as much opportunity in the last, 6 months or even more so 8 months to really see what the new things coming out into the market are, but right. They're really one of the leaders that came into it early, and they're really coming from a neuroscience background rather than a gaming background. So.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So it's essentially a game where the more focused you are, the more birds gather around, right? Mm-hmm. And then when you start to lose your focus, the wind sweeps the birds away, and so you want to try and keep as many birds as you can. Yeah. And I think that is such an interesting concept to be able to use tools which are typically seen as distracting or perhaps, leading to more scatterbrained individuals in the exact opposite direction and teaching them how to focus in a room full of people. And you can definitely see how the real life application of that would be, especially in large cities today where it's just, we're bombarded
Chaos.
with information on a daily basis.
I think, again, there's so many other alternative tools. There's more and more mindfulness-based apps like At Will that does it more on a corporate wellness scale. There's some newer ones that are coming out that are really, so Live a Moment, and a bunch of these other ones that just force you to take a little moment and just breathe and focus, and you can do it right with your your smartphone,
right,
without even having an additional device, because we all have our smartphones with us. So it's great to see that the development is not just about distraction.
Right. Yeah. It is nice to see, and we're sort of entering a new age, or a new era, as you put it. Defined by information overload, globalization, mobility, technological advances, educational and economic disparity. Do you think that wearable devices could sort of bridge the gap between educational and economic disparity?
I'm not sure about wearables. It'll be interesting to see where wearables go. Again, my expertise is much more on the wellness wearables, and right. I think that there is incredible opportunities, particularly in the digital health space. But I do think there needs to be more a focus on the user experience for people to really get the benefits of them, particularly for these things that are more, just mainstream.
Right.
It's all a great idea, and I like the thought of where it's going, but
Right.
you can spend huge amounts of money on buying all of these wellness toys, but if you're not getting the value out of it and the outcome that you desire or need, then you really need to be looking at what kinds of tools are you choosing? Are you choosing because it's the shiny object, or are you choosing it because it actually will fit seamlessly into your life and actually provide the outcome that you desire?
Right. That is important. And I think there's something that you said that was really awesome on one of your blogs. It was like a myopic trance of data or something like that. And I thought that was such a cool term. And it can be important to like kind of step back and be able to regulate that every once in a while. And I was going to ask you, did you have any experience with the Oculus Rift or anything of that nature?
Very little. I mean, I played with it a little bit,
Right.
but what I did, the one experience that I had with it that I thought was just phenomenal was actually just last March at South by Southwest. There was something that was done by the Case Foundation in collaboration with, I believe it was National Geographic and Oculus. And what they were doing was creating these virtual reality experiences where you were taken into an environment that was sort of for example, the one that I did, the experience was going into a coral reef that was getting damaged. And you're really experiencing what the changes are they're having to create empathy through the experience. And if you can use tools like that to help people sort of be immersed in the experience without having to take them scuba diving or in a submarine or whatever, in that particular instance, they had a whole bunch of other different scenarios that you could experience. But I thought that was really a powerful way to use technology in a very positive format that is exciting and fun.
Absolutely.
That's very tangible.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I agree 100% with that. It's amazing where that technology is headed. Just virtual reality in general, I mean, it really seems like something out of science fiction, but as Neil Gaiman says, he hates the term science fiction because he would prefer the term speculative fiction, because a lot of science fiction, ends up becoming true, or a lot of, stories which we could have thought were our wildest imagination is
Inspires innovation.
Yes, exactly.
Like, oh, well, and I've always lived by the sort of not what if, but when. And so, and that has gotten me in trouble in some instances. But,
Right.
and, for me, working in the innovation space and working with social technologies has always been, there are no limitations.
Right.
It's just a question of when we'll be able to be capable of doing different things. It's when we'll be able to have access to this kind, new kinds of technologies or this particular solution, rather than I hope someday we can do that. It's like, well, we will.
Right.
It's just a question of how long it'll take for that to happen.
Right.
So I think I agree. Science fiction is sort of a dated term.
Yeah. Absolutely.
If it has the desired outcome, we'll make it happen.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, and you're seeing technology being used to solve problems that we faced, and as you said, virtual reality has allowed us windows into the past, which we never would have been able to see, but also windows into the future of what could be. And those designed experiments in empathy, I think, are very important because it sort of takes it from something which is sort of impersonal to a personal level, especially with the Great Barrier Reef like that. If you could go down and see and be a part of the reef yourself, you're really immersed in the environment. I think that's, there's a lot of room for growth in those kind of technologies. And that's something that you mentioned, wearables as social technology for cognitive enhancement, which I think is really cool because empathy is a huge part of cognitive enhancement. You can drastically improve your life and the lives of others by experiencing empathy on a larger scale. And it's something I spoke about with Claire the other day. And I just think that's such a beautiful sentiment.
Yeah. No, I think there's great possibility in where we're going. And so I think it's really exciting.
Yeah.
And I think as long as we don't we don't disregard it and just say, well, it's too hard. Or, I mean, I think a lot of it is just mindset based as to whether it's going to happen and whether we can actually make those connections.
Right.
But
absolutely. Now, do you have any experience with Aspire? Because that's something that I don't know too much about, and I was hoping maybe you could enlighten me a little bit.
So, unfortunately, I didn't get them in my study. We had planned to initially have them in the study, but they were just launching, so we weren't able to get enough units. But I did get my hands on one for myself, and I really think they have a beautiful approach because it's much more about the holistic being. It's about your, it's tracking your breathing, it's tracking your activity, it's tracking your mindfulness, your heart rate. So it's looking at sort of the whole person. It's not just your physical activity. Now, I mean, I wasn't able to really test it in that community, so it's only from my own personal perspective. And the only negative I had with it, and I think that they've actually solved this because I had a very first unit. So it was sort of not beta, but it was definitely first iteration. And I initially synced it so that I could wear it, on my bra strap or whatever. And it was just not a good place for it, depending on what I was wearing or whatever, I needed to be able to shift it around. And at the time, the app was not letting me accommodate for that. I'm sure that's fixed by now. But I think, again, it's finding the device that has the outcome you desire, but also that fits seamlessly into whatever your lifestyle is and whatever your needs are. So, for me, I love the idea of the outcome, but the device didn't work for, seamlessly for me.
Okay.
But I think that, again, disclaimer in that was a very first iteration, and I think that it has evolved since then. And I really like what Nima's doing. I think they're really a great team doing some brilliant stuff. And again, it's another team that's got a lot of experience around the behavior science, and they're not just looking at, wow, this is a cool little gadget that, we want everybody to buy. It's more like, how can we change how people interact with each other and take care of themselves. Okay.
So it's essentially, it's a wellness app with, because I actually don't know anything about Spire.
Oh, okay. So it's a little device that almost looks like a smooth stone.
Okay.
And then it has a like a little, almost a buckle. I don't know if you call it a buckle, but it's basically like a little thing so that you can stick it on a belt or you can stick it on anything that's like a surface. It just it clasps, I guess.
Okay.
And that's the thing that tracks. So it has to be close to the skin. To a place where it's going to be able to measure your heart rate and your breathing, and then of course motion, activity, things like that. But the app itself tracks a lot more than a lot of the other fitness devices. The Apple Watch now I think tracks tracks a lot of things that the Spire does, but the nice thing is that they have good communication with each other. So whatever the device is, there's more and more consolidation in the different health apps that help you choose the right device and then insert your data in there so that you can get a bigger picture of what's going on with your health. So whether you're using a Spire or you're using a Fitbit or you're using an Apple Watch to do the actual tracking, you're getting the data that you need put into your health app.
Okay.
So I think, it collects the data that's more around mindfulness and general well-being versus like a Fitbit, which is really about fitness.
Right. Just focus on the fitness aspect, whereas this is more of a lifestyle product. Okay, that makes sense. And I wanted to ask you about your experience with Google Glass and what, if at all, what that experience was like.
I only tried Google Glass twice. I actually couldn't get my hands on the first iteration, and I wasn't sure I wanted. It's not that I didn't want to, but I just wasn't sure where it would fit within my study because it wasn't necessarily a well-being device. What I did find was in the interviews that I gave around people that were using Google Glass, is because it was such an early iteration and people weren't used to the whole idea of being filmed in cameras. I mean, now they're everywhere. Everybody's got a video camera in their pocket, and regardless of whether you're wearing it on your face or wearing it, it doesn't matter. So people are less and less afraid of that privacy thing, or they're just more accepting of the fact that it's the reality.
Right.
But I think initially there was a big backlash, and it was very similar to that of, you remember the old Jawbone headsets?
Yep.
Where, people were walking around, talking to themselves, and people, other people are like, oh my God, is this person crazy? And there's someone standing looking at a window talking, and you're like, oh my God, this person's totally nuts.
Yes.
Well, so you get the same kind of thing, not necessarily the crazy piece, but with glass, where, in the early adoption stage, you have mostly sort of early adopter kind of geeky people walking around, videotaping, and there were certain bars, for example, in San Francisco, that they were not allowing people in wearing them, because it was sort of, look,
Right.
this is a no filming zone. This is not cool.
Right.
So I think that's part of the reason that they didn't initially. They were sort of too early to succeed, at least in the mainstream, but they've been extremely successful in in applied situations, whether it's medical or in warehousing or all kinds of different things where you need your hands free. Sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Okay. Where you need your hands free, but you need access to data.
Right.
Immediately.
Right.
And to be able to tracking your, whatever you're doing, and using something like a chest camera or things like that is not quite the same thing, because it's from the wrong angle. You need to be able to see what you're seeing.
Right.
Exactly in that way. What I have experimented with is the Snapchat glasses.
Okay.
And those are super fun.
Yeah.
They're super fun. And I mean, that's sort of like, that's the fun version of what Google Glass, could have been. But they came out late enough, and they're for a demographic that's all about, videoing and
Right.
picture taking. So it's totally fine and acceptable. It's kind of goofy.
Yeah.
Whereas Google Glass was trying to make it almost serious.
Right. Yeah.
And I think if and when they relaunch, I think they have relaunched, but it's still more in the commercial space, with commercial usage. But I think when they come back for the mainstream, we've gotten used to it now. So
Right.
It's okay. I mean, it's
Right.
kind of like when Facebook first came out, people were like, oh, it's for college students. I'm not going to share anything. And now everybody's sharing everything.
Everything. Yeah. Too much almost.
Yeah. So it's just some of these things take time. We're
Yes.
humans. We need time to adopt.
Yeah, it's so funny. I'd forgotten about the rise of Bluetooth, the early rise, because it was, I think everyone at least had this interaction or knew someone who had this interaction where you are walking in and someone comes like, hey, how are you? How you doing? How you doing? And you're like, oh, I'm good, thanks. How are you? And then he's like, oh, sorry, this idiot's talking. Like, sorry, this fucking moron is trying to distract me from this. And you're like, oh God, like,
He's on the phone.
Yeah. So it turns out they're on the phone. You missed the little Bluetooth thing. I do remember that. Yeah, the Jawbone. That was so weird for so long, and still, you don't see that. I don't see them as much anymore. It seems.
No, they still have them, but I mean, I actually just found mine that I'd been using it for a long time. Actually, it was great when I was traveling because it was a small headset. And I tried to hook it up to my phone, and I think it's an older version of Bluetooth, so it didn't quite like to connect to it. I think you can still get them now, but the thing is, there's so many other versions that are so great, and I'm sure their newer version is probably fabulous too. But there's a lot more competitors out there now, and again, that's great because it accommodates everybody's different needs and desires. Some people don't want this tiny little thing in their ear that never really fits properly anyway.
Right.
That I actually end up by default most of the time just using my Apple headset because it's got a great microphone.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
now your background is in social tools and organizations. So did you sort of, what is the effect of having these tools at our fingertip, the ability to communicate in an instant's notice? Does it completely change what we think of as an organization, and how has it affected interpersonal relationships in those organizations?
I think it has hugely because more people have a voice. It really depends on the organization as to how that's impacted, but there's more of a voice, and there's more, and again, there's sort of, it's hard to generalize because in larger companies, they have a very strong culture that sort of drives how people interact. So even though the tools are there, they may not share as much as they could because they're afraid of Big Brother listening.
Yes, yeah.
Whereas you have smaller organizations that really thrive because they're really building things based on, a community of practice where everybody that is coming from different parts of the organization are giving their input on how a particular process or product or service is impacted or developed. And so you end up with these things that are much richer and more effective in the long run, without having to sort of, have a meeting over here and then, these people go work on it and you bring it back and it's like, no, that's not right. And you have these efficiencies that are really incredible, but you also have people that normally wouldn't necessarily have a voice that feel comfortable having a voice when they're using a mediated tool to make that happen, because they maybe are not willing to raise their hand in a physical meeting. So there's a lot of different things. That's for sort of the internal tools. The external tools, I mean, it's been phenomenal. And I think the work I'm doing now about digital self-mastery and really looking at how people engage with technology and feel comfortable with technology is kind of interesting to me, is being able to pull some of these pieces from my former work in social strategy, because one of the biggest constraints that I found with rolling out social technologies in organizations and getting the leadership to participate was people's relationship with technology, and people's, sort of either it's fear-based, or there's resistance, or they're hoarders where they just accumulate tons of technology but they never take time to learn it.
Right.
So there's sort of this, up until probably 5 years ago, you still had many people that at the top of the organization that had their secretaries printing out their emails. I mean, you laugh, but it's true.
I know.
So, when all of a sudden somebody's telling them, no, you need to be on social media, it's like, whoa, what do you mean? I'm not going to put myself out there.
Right.
And then they don't know how to put themselves out there without feeling vulnerable. And it's completely manufactured and sort of, it's done through a publicist. And it's very hard to make that transition of sort of, how do I engage without losing my sense of self, without having negative implications in the organization? Some of them embrace it, but some of them really, they're like, oh, well, I don't want the invasion of my privacy. I don't want people knowing who I am, where I am, whatever. But the thing is that, the new generation, they want to feel like the place that, the companies that they buy from, the people that they invest in, they want to know that they're real people and that they're people that care. And so there's a whole element of it that also drives, corporate social responsibility. It's about being real, authentic people that have bad days and have good days, and have reasons and passion for driving what they do and why they do it.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you have these communities within the organization to say, hey, I love working here. And, that can change an entire organization. So it has implications on so many different ways. It's hard to sort of describe one specific one. I think I came into it from the education technology side. And there it was simply like, oh my God, look at this beautiful way that we can deliver training and, disseminate information and get feedback. And it's seamless, and, people are engaging that never before had a voice. But you also find that there's some people that had a voice before that maybe aren't so comfortable working in this mediated environment. So it changes that dynamic too.
Wow.
So
it sort of reminds me of the switch actually from silent films to what they call talkies back in the day, because these silent film stars who were like just so famous after it became necessary to now hear your voice as well. A lot of them couldn't learn the lines. They couldn't, like, their voice, they were nervous about having it on camera, and they just fell apart. And so now you're seeing, and especially I was reading an interview with some of the older generation of comedians who were taught that, self-promotion is such a self-aggrandizing thing, and now they're having to learn to use these tools as means of self-promotion. It's so against their thinking, and I think that's such a fascinating paradigm shift that sort of we'll have to come to terms with. And you mentioned now that you're turning your focus more to young entrepreneurs. And have you found that this technology is sort of become essential to young entrepreneurs and has become sort of a cornerstone of how they access the world around them?
Yeah, well, so I have to correct you, because it's not just young entrepreneurs.
Right.
And the reason I say that is because a very large part of the demographic that I work with is people that are becoming entrepreneurs as a second stage of their career. So, and for a lot of them, they're 50 plus, like myself, where they're just going like, hey, look at this great opportunity. I don't have to do this junk that I didn't like doing before. Now I can really do what I love, and look at all the opportunity this provides because I have access to this technology that lets me share my passion.
Yeah.
And make a difference in the world. So, now I forgot your question because I was so busy thinking about it. It's not young.
No, that's good. That's an important distinction, and,
Yeah.
and thank you for correcting. But the question was just, this technology has sort of allowed a new age of entrepreneurship where you couldn't have before. You have access to all this information, but also the ability to put out your own information. And has this technology sort of become a cornerstone of how entrepreneurs access and interact with the world around them?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's like I don't know if you ever read Gladwell's Tipping Point, but it's come to this point where, before it was like we were building up all this technology and it was still, you had to be kind of a techie to understand it. And now all of a sudden you have a combination of the technology is more user friendly, so you don't have to be a super techie to do it, but there's also a lot of people that are really good at the tech that can do the tech for you, so you can just focus on your content. So it creates this environment where people can really focus on what they do best, which is kind of a unique opportunity. Before it was sort of you do what you're told to do. Oh, well, this is the job that needs to get done and you're pretty good at it, so you go do it. And it was just sort of the standard thing that happened. And if you're lucky, somebody will promote you. And if, that's sort of the way it worked. Now it's, if you have something that you find is of value and, and helps people or makes a difference or whatever it is, or people just like and want to buy, there's easy ways to, using technology, tell people that it's available and get the word out, and to even do through e-commerce, sell it and distribute it so that you can design your work and your business around your lifestyle rather than the other way around, where before it was like, well, I only make this much, so this is what I can afford to do. And I'm stuck in this place because that's where my job is. Now it's, well, I don't want to be there. I'm going to go do it from there. And as long as I've got a good internet connection, woohoo.
Right. Yeah. It's I think a lot of people see it as sort of terrifying, the advancements in technology, but I think we should sort of look at it as fascinating. I mean, we're in the midst of this technological revolution, the likes of which the world has never seen. And this would be the time that they're looking back on as saying this was the beginnings of it all. This was sort of when things were starting to take off. And I think that's really exciting. I think that's what we should, like, as you mentioned, that's what we should be focusing on, is how can this technology improve our lives?
Yeah.
And I think that's, I guess that's that's the entire question behind what you're doing. And what was it that initially led you to this? Like, what was the first set of light bulb that went off that you're like, wait a minute, this thing on my arm can help me improve my life every single day, or this thing that I go to bed with can tell me how much sleep I'm getting?
I don't know if there was any particular exact trigger point for me. I mean, I've always been sort of curious about technology and an early adopter and whatnot, but I think, sort of the culmination of the different points all sort of aligning for me between my work before and then my research now, and really understanding the behavioral science behind why my clients before were resistant to adoption of the social technologies or struggled with the technologies, and really understanding, how important it is to really understand that relationship, and also looking at it for myself. On the scale of the digital self profiles that I work with, I'm probably still more in the somewhere between digitally curious and digital hoarder, where I just love to try new technologies, and sometimes I just don't have the bandwidth or the amount of time needed to really learn them well enough so that I get the full benefit.
Right.
So, I mean, nobody's perfect. We're all trying to get to that place where we're at a balance point. But what's really been clear to me is how that relationship really impacts your ability to find flow in your work and your life. And when you can be aware of that piece, how much it just opens up. and you're all of a sudden like, okay, well, I get it. That's what I'm doing. So I either, I got to find some way to either modify that behavior or compensate for it or hire someone to do that, because it's not a good thing for me to be working on.
Right.
Right. I used to hard code HTML years ago. That's not something I should be doing when I'm doing my website. It does not. Don't let me near my website, because
Right.
I will go in. I'm like, oh, I don't like the way that sits. I think I'll go in and change the. I'll try to hard code it, and the problem is now it's supposed to be user friendly. So you go start doing that, and you make a big mess.
Yes.
So,
yes.
I think for me, it's been very clear. And then the work that I've been doing in just learning how entrepreneurs use technology in this changing way, and watching their physical reaction when you talk about technology, not just for me, but when I hear other people talking about the different technologies you could use for your e-commerce or for managing your lists or for doing this. And you see half of the room is just sort of shrinking, going, oh God, more things to learn.
Yeah.
And you realize, most of these people are actually far more capable than they think they are. And the ones that aren't, that's totally okay, because there's other people in this room that are way more competent than they are on the technology, but have no interest in doing what they're doing.
Right.
So put them together.
Put them together.
Yeah. So we need to learn to delegate. We need to learn those other behaviors that we've gotten. Entrepreneurs naturally try to do everything themselves. And that's the part that's counter to the entrepreneurial behaviors. You need to learn to delegate far sooner. And it's hard, because you want control over your baby, what you're building, what you're creating, but you also need to have time to do that.
Yes.
So some of those things just don't make sense.
Yes, absolutely.
For you to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is funny. There's two very opposite sides of the spectrum, two very opposite reactions. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of in between. It's this either extreme, like, oh no, this is the way things are going, I have no idea how to do all this, or oh my God, this is the way things are going, this is amazing, look at all this new stuff. I remember the first time I tried the Oculus Rift, I was completely blown away, because I had seen footage of it and I had seen people doing it, but then actually experiencing it for the first time is something of a beast of a completely different nature. It is, you put it on and you really, I remember thinking instantly, like, oh, this is the future. This is, you're looking around and you're completely immersed in an environment with the exact dimensions of the room that you're in. And it was just so mind-bending. It was definitely, that was the moment for me that I was like, oh, okay, I get this now. This makes sense. And after doing it too, you're playing a game, but I probably burned more calories that day than the hike that I took the day before I went on it, because I was so sore that, like, the next day I was like ducking and diving and running around the room and getting down on all fours, and it's just so crazy how active it is and how immersive it is too. So I think I'm very, very fascinated to see where the technology will go, especially when it comes to those sort of immersive technologies. And I wanted to ask you about something that I didn't really have a lot of experience in, but Dreamweaver, could you sort of explain, did you have any experience with Dreamweaver?
Not unless you mean like the old version of Dreamweaver, which was website design. I don't think that's what you mean.
Maybe I've read the wrong thing. It could be. Okay, what about social optimization theory? Let's go with that.
My pet project.
Yes.
So social optimization theory was something that I worked with when I was doing social strategy for years. And it was really just, it wasn't a theory at the time. That I did that more in, it's sort of an early theory that I worked on while I was doing my PhD. But the basic premise about it is, building and maintaining mutually beneficial and effective relationships, which, and that's using online technology. So well, I shouldn't say it's online and offline. It's about nurturing those relationships that you have, and then maybe you make them face-to-face at a conference, for example. And then so often, you maybe take a business card and then you get home and you're like, who was that? It's like, so, it's doing the simple steps of everything from back in the day was, the simple steps where, okay, well, I'll connect with them on LinkedIn, I'll send them an email, And then but then it dropped off. So it's like, what are you doing to nurture that relationship? It's, it's sending them, it's when you come across an interesting article, you're like, oh, I remember that conversation I had with so-and-so. So how much effort does it take to copy and paste the link to that and send it to the person and say, hey, I thought of you? And the value that simple connection that may even be a year later of like, hey, I remember this conversation and I thought this would interest you, takes you 3 minutes to write max and send it. And all of a sudden you've got this reconnect with this person who could be a valuable relationship, whether it's first, second, or even third degree down the line. So in the earlier stages, it was really about how do you use, social media and also internal tools inside organizations to really nurture those relationships once you've connected. And those could be online, but often they were initiated in a face-to-face interaction. And so how do you nurture those? And when I started developing out the theory, it was really more looking at how each stage of our development with our relationship with technology changes, and how we interact with that technology, and how that mediated interaction impacts the relationship that we have with people. So, whether it's, you're sending a link, or whether it's using a FaceTime conversation, or whether it's through a Zoom that's recorded, which is a whole nother thing than just doing, Skype, because people are aware of the fact that, okay, you can go back to this conversation. Or, whether it's further down the line where you're doing a video and you're going to post it on YouTube, and how does that relationship actually, get nourished or impacted as you're developing your sophistication with the tools and developing your relationship with technology in that process, to the point where, you get up to the upper levels where you're looking at generativity, where you're creating ideas, creating different concepts, and you're sharing them with other people and making them actually have an impact that's far greater than yourself. And, and then getting to the point where you're actually co-creating things. So that whole progression sort of got integrated with the social optimization model, where it's not just about sort of that one-to-one interaction, but it becomes that one-to-many, and then the many-to-many. And so that was a very, short explanation to a very long theory, but hopefully that makes sense.
No, that's extremely fascinating. I mean, it's changing everything. It's changing all of our social interactions. It's changing how we move forward as a species, really. I mean, it really is going to make us evolve. And I think, just the possibilities are endless. The potential is there. We're going to see some very, very interesting things in our lifetime. And I could stay and talk to you about this all day, but I know you have guests and I don't want to keep you. So thank you for coming on. Yeah. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun today.
Me too. And, thank you.
Hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Sounds good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look forward to it. Thanks.
I went to sleep last night. All right, guys, pretty fascinating stuff. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in next week, where I will be speaking with Bjorn Öste, the CEO of Oatly, which is a large oat milk company based out of Sweden. They're farmed with Swedish oats, which can survive the cold Viking winter. So he talks about problems with the dairy industry, different farming practices, and a lot of really interesting stuff. So please tune in next week for my chat with him. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.
To the night when you weigh heavy on my mind, and the shadows fall against the wall. From the middle of the road where you've been spending all your time, I just wish that you would call. Wish there was something I could do